Right now, I'm very happy to welcome to our program Lacy MacAuley. She's a member of the D.C. Welcoming Committee's media team, which is organizing protests at Donald Trump's inauguration in Washington, D.C. on Friday, January 20th. And Lacy, thank you so much for making the time to be on our program tonight. And it's good to talk to you again. It's been a while. We've spoken and worked with other groups in the past and helped me connect with a lot of great guests here on the show. So thanks. It's good to talk to you again in another capacity.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you, Scott.
And first of all, maybe tell our listeners a little bit about this group that you're working with, the D.C. Welcoming Committee. You know, what the group's about, who's involved in all that.
The D.C. Welcoming Committee is actually the group in D.C. We're basically a collective of committed, experienced, longer-term activists here in Washington, D.C. And the reason we're called the Welcoming Committee is because we are welcoming everyone into our city, D.C., to protest at the inauguration. We are basically creating a framework for action and providing a lot of support and logistical services because we know that just a massive number of people are going to be here in our city over the week of January 20th to protest and to take a stand against the political tide that we're facing starting January 20th.
So lay out for our listeners, what are the plans for January 20th? And I'll just mention briefly that last week, and not all of our listeners I'm sure caught this, but we did have one of the organizers of the Women's March on Washington, which is another protest that's taking place the day after the inauguration. The location, I think, has just been revealed, but there was a lot of struggle with the National Park Service and the Trump Inauguration Committee that was trying to block any of the major sites on the National Mall to be used by protesters. But at any rate, that is a march and rally that we'll be talking about more on this program and on this station, no doubt. But Lacy, maybe you could lay out for us a bit about the details of what is being planned, or as much as you can share with us tonight. There's just basically a number of groups all across the city that are actually planning actions. I can tell you that these actions are actually starting the weekend before the January 20th week. So that's the weekend of Dr. Martin Luther King Day. There's going to be essentially a group that is planning workshops and a convergence to basically, discuss the issues around the political situation that we face, to lay out a number of workshops that are oriented towards political education, different ideologies, different skill sets, different points in history are going to be kind of presented through that weekend. So really, we are encouraging people to come to the city starting that weekend before January 20th, and essentially to, start protesting with us, starting then to really start to get kind of a feel, for that weekend and to, boost their skill sets, make connections in Washington, D.C. So the Disrupt J20 group is actually coordinating that weekend of workshops and political education during MLK weekend. There are going to be a number of things, both things that we know about now and things that we don't yet know about throughout that week. We have a number of different types of balls that are happening in the city at that time. If anyone's ever been to a presidential inauguration or thought about a presidential inauguration, you know that actually the attendees of that inauguration love to go to balls. So there are balls being planned, by the Republican committees in every single
one of the 50 states, or basically effectively every single one of the 50 states. Some of the smaller states might be doubling up or, have funding issues or something like that. But almost every single one of the 50 states will have their ball for people from their states. And those are basically all balls where people get dressed in tuxedos and gowns and celebrate Donald Trump going into office. There are going to be a number of people protesting outside of those balls. Of course, groups such as, Breitbart and various organizations such as the NRA also are affiliated with planning balls and, getting people together who want to celebrate the election of Donald Trump. We will be protesting at those balls as well. And so those start really, some can start like as early as the 18th or 19th of January. And really the day that most of those balls will want to take place are the 20th of January, of course, the day of the inauguration. There might be balls continuing into the 21st. I haven't heard of any at this moment. But, so then the 20th, of course, is the day that we have our inauguration. And there are a number of different plans happening in the city during that time. There are groups planning everything, including Answer, Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. That group is planning a rally of some sort. Al Sharpton, as I understand, has called for activities in the city at that time. The Occupy Inauguration Group also has a march planned. I happen to know their plans are marching from Malcolm X Park, also known as Meridian Hill Park. Its real name is Malcolm X Park, in Washington, D.C., marching from Malcolm X Plaza into the city. There is going to be also a massive permitted march that our group is planning. There are going to be unpermitted activities as well, being planned by affinity groups, being planned by people who are tightly organized small groups of people who plan to, basically do some creative actions to disrupt J20, to disrupt the inaugural activities. So that's going to be, again, both permitted and unpermitted actions. We are planning kind of a massive march, which will be family friendly, which everyone can safely participate in without any cause or concern that there might be, any sort of problem there. And there are going to be a number of different activities happening as well that night. In contrast to the balls, which are happening all over the city, there's an interesting initiative as well, which involves restaurants all over the city who are going to be participating and donating funds, something of that nature, to actually a cause that involves at-risk people. In addition, there's a potential that there will be a student march, although that's not currently clear. The DC public school system actually is off that day, is closed that day, and so we're looking at the potential of a student march. Recently, the students in Washington, D.C. actually had a student strike, and there was a massive protest of Donald Trump actually not too long after his election by D.C. public school students. So there's always a potential that they will do it on that day. But I'm not sure. The plans are still coming together for that. I should say that we are working on getting an actual print schedule up right now, Scott. It will be up in the next few days at our website, disruptj20.org. But the details of all of these activities are really, some of them have been finalized, some of them are still a little bit in flux. And so it's really, right now, something that we have concepts of things that are happening, but we don't yet have all, the final details. And of course, I think that there are probably some things being planned that we don't yet know about. For the 21st, of course, as you mentioned, that is another march in downtown Washington, D.C. to call attention to women's issues. And, it seems like you probably know a lot about that, or your listeners probably know a lot about that if you had something on that last week, had someone talking about that on your program. So I hope what I get, I guess I hope what you're getting a picture of, Scott, is that basically we have a massive number of activities planned for the inauguration. There is something for, every variety of person. There's also, potential concerts being planned. If people want to go and listen to music, although the details of those are still a little up in the air as well. Essentially, I think that it's safe to say that, for anyone out there who's strongly thinking that we have to make a stand right now, for anyone out there who's strongly thinking that they would like to make their voice heard in opposition to what's going on right now with our country, in opposition to our president-elect, I think it's safe to say that if they plan to come to the city, they will find activities that will interest them on that weekend and that week.
All right, Lacy, thank you for a very detailed rundown there. And just a couple of follow-up questions. You said that the D.C. Welcoming Committee was planning a legal, family-friendly march. When would that occur?
Details are still actually in flux on that march.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I get one important question.
It's happening on the 20th of January, and I think, kicks off sometime early in the morning. Right now, what we're putting out publicly is 9 a.m. and all day.
Okay.
So basically being ready for being outdoors for many hours on that day.
Right. Well, one important question to ask you is this. Overall, what's the main message that your group and those activists and participants in these various permitted and unpermitted demonstrations, what's the message you're trying to send to the rest of the United States and the world that will be looking at this inauguration?
Well, essentially, I think one of the most important things to remember is that it must be made clear to future generations and to the rest of the world, the rest of the international community, that there's an incredible number, a massive number of people in the United States who do not support Trump, his presidency, or what he stands for, and that we simply do not consent to his rule. There are a number of reasons that we would feel that way. Essentially, we kind of, I think, I don't mean to speak for everyone in the group. I think there is a number of people who, would take, different varieties or different nuances of the task. But I think all of us can safely say that, we're all concerned with what Donald Trump represents and concerned with the direction that our country is going right now. And to be complicit when you are so concerned is not an option. And it's actually not an option for a number of people who are really living marginal lives. It's not an option for a number of people who really are at risk of being harmed from a Trump presidency and what that presidency represents. Of course, Black American communities, Muslim American communities, immigrant communities, women, LGBTQIA+ communities, there are a number of different communities, and of course, American Indian communities, and a number of different communities who actually are really at risk right now. And so our rights potentially are going to be violated. And so it really doesn't feel like an option for a lot of people. I think a lot of people really just are feeling like they need to stand up and stand in opposition to what this all represents.
Lacy, to what extent will participants be engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience in the tradition of Gandhi, in the tradition of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And a lot of struggles here in the United States over the decades have used civil disobedience. How much will we see that on the 20th, on January 20th?
Well, Scott, of course, as you might realize, I'm not really at liberty to say exactly, specifics about plans related to that. It is safe to say that, yes, many groups are planning some sort of arrest scenario. Many groups are planning an act of civil disobedience and a peaceful act of civil disobedience on that day. I think that for anyone who would like to participate and really make a strong statement and put themselves on the line in that way, it's probably best to really start speaking to people who you care about, start speaking to people you know really well, and organize an affinity group, organize a group of people who can really stand together. And then if you are joining with a larger action, you know that you can support each other in that very important decision to make a stand and put your body on the line and risk arrest, partaking in civil disobedience there. I can say, of course, Scott, the vast majority of people, I think it's safe to assume the vast majority of people are not at risk of arrest. Of course, this is a large public area that we'll be in. We are going to get permits for our own marches and make sure that those are planned and open and, safe. Of course, the whole city is also being organized around the idea of a parade. So there's a parade zone. And, it's not possible necessarily to say what's going to happen in particular with signage, because sometimes they change their policies on all of that. But usually people can bring their signs and protest along the parade route as well, should they desire to. And so there is really the vast majority of people are very safe in terms of not risking arrest. So basically it's a massive demonstration, and the whole city will be oriented towards foot traffic. So there will be some arrest scenarios, but I think that most people are not going to have to worry about that at all. And right. You won't be arrested unless you want to be. That's my guess. Right. And of course, it's really impossible, unfortunately, to predict with 100% certainty what's really going to happen. But
right.
Anyway, so that's my guess.
Okay. Well, Lacy, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you this. Mm-hmm. This presidential election, unlike many others in our recent history, has been extremely controversial, as are the results. And the controversies still continue here, with Trump having lost by a record number of popular votes, but winning the Electoral College, and constitutionally mandated but archaic system that really denies the whole principle of one person, one vote. Given the controversy over this election, how much response have you had for activists around the country wanting to be involved in these protest demonstrations?
We've had an overwhelming response. We've been hearing from people who are planning, resistance and planning to protest on the 20th of January in their home cities all over the country. We've been hearing also from people in different countries who are actually going to be protesting at U.S. embassies on the 20th. And so we've seen a massive kind of response, because at this moment, I just think that there are so many of us who we want to make a stand, because we fear that silence is complicity. And if you're worried about the direction that our country is going, don't stay still. Don't be silent. Now is the time, both online and offline, to bring your feet, bring your voice, bring your hands. We need you. We need you. And so I think a lot of people are feeling that right now and just need to stand up. So we welcome people to come to D.C. We welcome people to come to Washington, D.C., our city, to protest the week of the 20th, January 20th. You can check our website, www.disruptj20.org. We're the D.C. Welcoming Committee. And, of course, plan actions in your own city if you feel so inclined.
Well done. Lacy, thank you so much. And I have to say, I was at the protests around George W. Bush's inauguration in January of
Oh, my goodness.
2001, and had some wonderful experiences on that day. The weather was horrendous, so I'm hoping for good weather. I'll be back down there, and I'm looking forward to seeing you and a lot of the protesters that are listening tonight, activists who
be sure to
will
drop
be
a
there.
line, Scott. We look forward to seeing you.
Oh yeah, no, I'll certainly we'll definitely get in touch so that we can do some interviews with the folks organizing things and the aftermath and all that. So I'm looking forward to being down there, as I know a lot of our listeners are. Lacy, thank you so much, and I'll just repeat the website one more time: disruptj20.org, and you can sign up for more information, have your questions answered, etc. Appreciate you being there, Lacy, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Scott. See you soon.
Bye-bye.